let's kick things off here in Visual Studio Code, specifically within the AI Toolkit extension. To recap on what we've done in the prior videos, we've created an agent within the Agent Builder. It's a pet planner agent that helps recommend activities for humans to do with their pets. We've tested things out. We're using GPT 4.1 Mini via Microsoft Foundry. We've added a local custom MCP server that provides mock data for recommending activities that we can do with our pet. We've also generated the code for our agent, and I have that here in the background. And we've set up the environment to install the dependencies. We ran the original script, and then once we knew that was working properly, we then enabled tracing with the help of Copilot. Now what we want to do is get a feel for how our agent is performing across a variety of different inputs, because right now we've just been doing some gut checks. We'll send the input, we'll get the output. If it looks good, great. If not, well, let's tweak things a little bit. But when you're creating agents, you want to do something a bit more methodical. And so that's where evaluations come into play. So we can add evaluations also using Copilot as well. And this is going to minimize the amount of manual coding and setup that we need to do. So we're going to open up Copilot by selecting Toggle Chat. And all I'm going to pass into it is add evaluation to my agent. Just that simple prompt. I do have Pet Planner Agent open as well so that we can grab that particular file as context. And I'm using Claude Sonnet 4.5 and I am in agent mode. I'm going to press enter here. And in pressing enter, this is going to start kicking off a series of questions from Copilot to help us with planning our evaluations. Very quickly at the top, I'll show you the first tool that it invoked, which is going to be this evaluation planner. This is an AI Toolkit tool that is available with Copilot, and this tool helps with planning the process of adding evaluations to your agents. And so it's gathering the necessary information that it needs, and it's taking a look at the app itself. So the evaluators that it has recommended we use are tool call accuracy, response relevance, and then coherence. I could use the default ones that are listed here. I could also describe my own evaluation metrics if I wanted to create some custom metrics. I personally only want to use relevance and coherence. All right. And pressing enter there, this is going to use the evaluators that are available within the Azure AI Evaluation SDK. And so from here, it then asks me, okay, do you have a test data set? Because if not, I need to create that for you. And in this case, I don't have a test data set, and that's okay. So for context, a test data set is what's going to be utilized when doing evaluations to assess the agent's output against the input. Sometimes you may already have a data set, and if you do, then you would tell Copilot at this point, hey, I have it, and this is the name of that file. But I don't have any, so I fall into the second camp of generating a data set. So this is great because Copilot can generate the data set for me versus me providing the data set itself. And this is going to be generating synthetic data, or also known as like fake data. So I'm going to say yes, but I only wanted to create 3 rows of data. Otherwise, I think by default, it might give you 10. Let's keep things short. The more rows of data, the longer it takes to do evaluation. So I'll say only create 3 rows of data. And once it has created the rows of data, the first thing that it's going to do is create the inputs. So that's going to be the synthetic inputs from the user itself. But we still need to get output. And the only way that we can get outputs is by actually running the app. And so just to scroll up to show you exactly what happened here, it created a new file called test_queries.jsonl, and we can go ahead and open that if we really want to. And I see we have some prompts here about a golden retriever in Seattle, a senior cat in Miami, and also there's a mixed breed dog and for someone located in Denver. So Let me close this back up. And the next thing that it needs from us is to say, yeah, how about you run the app to collect some fresh responses? So from here, I'll say yes, collect responses. Now, if you wanted to provide your own responses to the input, that wouldn't quite be the same as actually getting the output from the model itself, because the output should be based on output from the model. So we're going to let Copilot run the app itself. It's going to create its own file to actually get this output and place it into our data set itself. So we have another tool call. It's Get Evaluation Agent Runner Best Practices. And this one is going to be leveraged in figuring out how to create that file that I just mentioned and running the agent to actually collect the output from our agent against the input that's going to be passed in. So it's creating an agent runner script to collect responses. All right, and just to show you the process it's following to collect those responses, let me just close things up here for you a little bit. So here's that collect responses file that it created. I can see if I scroll up a little bit, we've processed one of the three. So two of the three now have also been processed, and then the final one has also been processed as well. We have all three responses collected. They're going to be saved in this test_responses.jsonl file. We can open that one up. I see both the query and I can see the response. That's exactly what we want as we move forward with setting up the evaluations. All right, so at this point, what we'll need to do is continue the conversation with Copilot. I had to do a little bit of coaching for it. So at this point, what I'm going to tell Copilot is I have my data set for running evaluations with my agent. Add evaluations to my agent. And this will get things on track for it to continue with the process. So it's going to call that evaluation planner tool again, and it has the proper response and queries. It's going to go back through that process of choosing the recommended evaluators and relevance and coherence. Yeah, we're going to move forward with that. Those are the ones that I wanted. Yes, use those two evaluators. And from there, what it'll start to do is actually create our evaluation script itself. So it knows that we're using relevance and coherence as the evaluators. We have our queries that are available in the test queries JSONL. We have our responses in the test responses JSONL. We know the framework is using the Azure AI evaluation framework, and then, or the SDK. And then the language is going to be Python. You need to validate that this looks good. I think this plan looks great. So from here, what I'm going to do is generate the evaluation code just by entering in yes. Now that I have entered in yes, it's going to start creating the file itself. We have another AI Toolkit tool call here, and it's going to be the Get Evaluation Code Generation Best Practices. I'll expand what's happening here so that we can get an idea of what's going on. What it's going to do now is create the actual evaluation script itself. And this is leveraging the Azure AI Evaluation SDK. Could take a little bit of a moment, but in any case, once it's complete, we'll actually have the script that we can run on our own. It also may be the case that Copilot wants to run it for you, which is totally fine if it needs to do that. I do see that I'm getting a question about fetching the Python environment information. And so I want to make sure that this gets installed in the right place, because sometimes it doesn't realize that I have this environment, this virtual environment. So let's go ahead and click allow here. And it realizes that it forgot the UV. So it went and added that back in. So we'll go ahead and allow that. So we're installing the Azure AI evaluation package. So that's good and complete. And now it's going to create a README for me. We get documentation. This is great. Because if I was brand new to evaluation, didn't know a thing about it, I would want that level of guidance and understanding of what's happening in there. So it's creating this README for me that explains how to set things up and how to run the evaluation as well. So this is definitely helpful. And I see that it's created it. So let's go take a look at that right now. Here's that evaluation README. And let's just open up the preview. I know I have a lot happening on this screen. Let me close up what I can for you. Let's see. So within this README, I have my overview, I have my prerequisites that are going to be necessary, and I also know how to run it. It also helps me with understanding the results as well. This is very valuable information because more often I see folks say you should do evaluation, but then there's no understanding of what the results mean. So again, super helpful, Copilot. 100% appreciate this. Where are we left right now? So it wants to set up the Azure OpenAI environment variables. We are using the Azure default credential, and it even asks me some information about setting that up. Let's see what we have here so far, because I might just have it modify this based on that. So what I have here, I can see that it's pulling in just the API key, and that's not what we want to do. So what I would say from here is to modify to use the Azure default credential because we're already authenticated. We don't want to hard code any API keys. So we're going to say modify to use the Azure default credential. We'll see how that does in modifying that. And already I'm seeing that we have the proper import. So that's a really good start. And it got rid of that API key. We don't want to hard code API keys. And so the only thing that we need to make sure is that we have the endpoint set and the deployment as well. Now, assuming that this is all great and wonderful, let's go ahead and keep this and keep the README that got created as well. But coming back to this evaluate agent script, I'm going to close up Copilot so we can get an idea what's happening here. I'll take you through what's happening in this code. Once we get past the import statements, we also need to define what our endpoint and the model name is. So we're still using GPT 4.1 mini for evaluations. At this step, you can change to a different model if you want for your evaluations. Essentially, we're doing AI assisted evaluations. And so there's an AI that's going to be the judge, if you will. And I won't get into which models are going to be best for doing evals, but right now I'm going to use 4.1 mini. And then below that, we have our environment variables with a fallback of GPT-4 as a default, just in case there's not one defined. And then within here, we're getting the credential. Thank goodness for not using API keys here, right? We want to be following security best practices. We're creating the model config, and that model config is going to require both the Azure endpoint and the deployment. And then we also need the API version as well. Then we initialize our evaluators. So because we're using the AI evaluation SDK, we are going to be using built-in evaluators. And two of those built-in evaluators that are available are the relevance evaluator and the coherence evaluator. So the relevance evaluator is going to assess whether the agent's output is relevant to the input that it was given. And then the coherence evaluator is going to assess whether the output from the agent, like if it makes sense, is it logical, things of that nature. And in order to initialize both of those, you need to pass in both the model config as well as the credential. We're noting where our data is located. So it's that test responses JSON-L file. We have some print statements to just indicate when we're starting evaluation and when it's getting the data and the evaluators that we're using. And then from there, we call evaluate, and that's when we set up the mapping for the evaluators. And so the mapping is going to be very crucial because we're going to be pulling data from that data set that was created. We want to make sure that we clearly indicate what's a query and what's a response here. but Copilot did this for us already. And then we get the output path for the evaluation results. And so that's going to be available at evaluation_results.json. We also get a nice printout of everything as well. And so before we run this evaluation file, what we need to do is fill in the values for our endpoint as well as our deployment. And so here for me, that's line 14 and 15. And so in case you're wondering, well, where are those? You can find them back over in the Foundry portal. So here from the welcome page of the Foundry portal, again, we're in the new experience, which is accessible by selecting this new Foundry toggle. You want to navigate to where your models are. Because we're doing AI assisted evaluations, we need information about the model. So we're going to go over into build, followed by models. And then this is where I have my 4.1 model. This is also where your 4.1 mini model will also be. When you select that, you're going to go to details, and at the very top, you're going to get the target URI. That's going to be the endpoint that we're going to need. So you can click this copy icon there to copy that. Back over here in Visual Studio Code for the Azure OpenAI endpoint for mine, I'm going to paste that in there because that's the endpoint for the model. That's not the Foundry project endpoint. I even have a comment here that says that. And then for the OpenAI deployment itself, it defaulted to GPT-4. We actually want to pass in GPT-4-mini. If you don't want to hard code these values directly in your script, that's fine. You can create a .env file and save them there. You can create environment variables for it. I'm just going to hard code mine in here for the sake of this video and save that. And now that this has been saved, we are in a good position to move forward with running this evaluation file. So what I'm going to do is type Python evaluate_agent.py and press enter. And then from here, it should kick off everything that has to do with this script. So it's starting the evaluation and it found the data, which is going to be that test_responses.jsonl file. And then below that, we have our evaluators. Let's expand this so we can just see what's happening here. All right, we executed the first line, second, and a third line. Everything's complete. We have some aggregated metrics as well that's happening. And then we have the summary. So this is what we're really looking for as at this step. We can see that for relevance, we have 3 completed lines. If anything failed, it would show in my case in the failed line section. Also, if there's any errors that would show as well. Same for coherence. I can see where things were saved. I do have this readout of the results, which is great. I can see the aggregate metrics available. So for relevance, we're looking at a 4.0, and coherence, we're looking at a 4.0. The highest that you can get is a 5. So there's definitely some improvement from an average perspective that could be made. So for example, for query 1 about the golden retriever in Seattle, the relevant score is a 5.0, but coherence got a 4. Query 2, things aren't as great because for relevance, we got a 3, and the coherence, we got a 4. And then for the third query, we've got 4s for both relevance and coherence. The results themselves are going to be saved at the evaluation_results.json. And so if I open up my files, I can find that right here is where I can see them. So that's perfect. Now, what do these scores actually even mean? How do I know how to move forward with modifying anything? All great questions that are probably floating around your head right now. What I would recommend doing if you're brand new to evaluations at this step is to actually ask GitHub Copilot to help you with understanding the scores. So what we're going to do is open up Copilot, and I am going to tell it, provide a report for my evaluation results and recommend what I could do to improve my agent based on the results. And then I'll say, save this as a markdown file called evaluationreport.md. All right. So again, we're in agent mode for this. We're going to go ahead and send that on over to Copilot. Let's see what it does. So it's analyzing the results that are in the evaluation_results.json file. It's creating a comprehensive evaluation report based on those results. Again, if you're brand new to evals or you just need a little assistance understanding what the output means and, most important, how to move on and forward from there, this is a really great idea of what I'd recommend sending over to Copilot to get that assistance. So it's working. It's doing its thing right now. We're going to give it a moment to create that report for us. All right, so we seem to have some output. Let me just make things a little larger here so we can see what's going on. It's giving me its analysis directly here within its output, and I can definitely see some important things here. But again, we wanted it to create that markdown file. So let's go over to that markdown file that we asked for it to create. And it's evaluation report.md. Let me close up this chat. Let's close up the terminal and let's preview this. All right, so this is really great. I can see when this was run. I see the agent itself, the model, how many queries. We have an executive summary that was created as well. Now, despite the scoring, everything did pass because there's a threshold, whereas you need at least 3 or higher to be considered passing for relevance and coherence. And I get the analysis that I'm looking for. I see the areas of improvement. So I have an idea of how to move forward. I can see strengths, things of that nature. And then I have a nice summary below of all the strengths, all the areas of improvement as well. I even have recommendations in here of what to do to improve the behavior. This is definitely a really great thing to consider using if you're building agents, because just submitting prompts and getting relatively decent results doesn't provide you with enough of foundation of understanding whether your agent is behaving as intended. But when you add evaluation to your agent, you start creating an actual process for assessing your agent's behavior. And if you take things even a step further, like I've done, to get further guidance on what the results means, this can really help create a truly robust, helpful agent building workflow.